Call to order the Newton County Board of Supervisors, September 29th, 2021 meeting to order. Stanger, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Evelyn?
Here.
Mr. Tiller?
Here.
Ms. Page? Here. Mr. Steers?
Here.
Mr. Lockwood?
Here.
All right. Thank you. Welcome everyone this morning, everyone on TV. Before we get started on our agenda today, Mr. Hathaway, we got something real quick we need to take care of.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'd like to start our meeting with a request for authorization to enter into an agreement with SPF Investment to partner with SPF Investment, for the county to partner with SPF Investment for the construction of an industrial access road off of Route 106 to serve an economic development project. We have had discussions about this project. Things are moving forward. A big component of this project is the infrastructure to facilitate a potential new business coming into the county. With the agreement, the county would be agreeing to seek state funding for the construction of the industrial access road funding, but the county would also be agreeing to commit up to $800,000 for the construction of the road, whether we receive the grant funds or not. We've been in constant discussions with the state for the past 2 months. We feel really good that funding will be available in excess of the $800,000 that we are committing to in this document. But in the event we do not receive state funds, we do have Central Virginia Transportation Authority funding currently totaling about $1.6 million in our account that we could put towards our $800,000 commitment. I don't believe we'll need it. We're getting word from the state that we won't need it, but in the event, you always plan for the worst. So there is a motion requesting authorization for me to execute an agreement with SPF Investment to construct an industrial access road off of State Route 106. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, that's fine. I agree. It'll be in a form approved by my office, so I'm comfortable with that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hathaway. Anybody comments or discussion? No, Ms. Page.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no discussion by the board or questions or comments, Mr. Chairman, I move to authorize the county administrator to execute an agreement with SPF Investments in a form approved by the county attorney for the construction of an industrial access road along State Route 106.
Thank you, Ms. Page. Ms. Stanger, poll the members, please.
Mr. Evelyn?
Aye.
Ms. Page?
Aye.
Mr. Tiller?
Aye.
Mr. Steers?
Aye.
Mr. Lockwood?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. First item on the agenda, presentation and discussion on a recently completed Lower Chickahominy Watershed Collaborative Memorandum of Understanding. Ms. Stewart from Plan RVA, and is Justin, and is he going to be here today? I guess. He's not here. All right. You doing it solo?
It's on? Okay, thank you. All right, well, thank you for having me here today. My name is Sarah Stewart, and I am the planning manager for the environment program at Plan RVA. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about how we got to where we are with the formation of the Lower Chickahominy Watershed Collaborative and the MOU. And then we'll talk about the statements of agreement and the MOU. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain them. Okay. Okay, wait. Oh, Rodney. Okay. Oop. Well, you're getting a good preview. There we go. Okay. Okay. I should start by saying that this project up until now has been funded by the Virginia Coastal Zone Management Program. I'll give you a little bit of background in a minute on why they were interested in this area. But I would also like to state that there are many partners and stakeholders that have been involved and interested over the last few years that kind of got us to this point. You'll see on here, obviously, the localities in the lower Chickahominy watershed, New Kent County being one of them, Charles City County, and James City County. You'll see the 3 federally recognized tribes that either are based in the watershed or own land in the watershed. You'll also see a smattering of state agencies, some academic institutions, land conservancies. There are more, but at a certain point, you gotta draw that line and, yeah, not put too many logos on a slide. Whoops. Okay. So we are actually in year 5 of a 5-year project, but it has gone through a process, and so not all of it has been focused on, say, the creation of an MOU, but it has led to that point. So the lower Chickahominy watershed proper is the hatched area that you see on the map, and the 3 localities are those I mentioned earlier, New Kent, Charles City, James City. So how did this come about? The Virginia Coastal Zone Management Program did some GIS modeling to look at ecological significance across coastal Virginia, so across kind of tidewater Virginia. And they expected to see some hot spots, and they saw them. And then they noticed that the lower Chickahominy watershed had some spots that were springing up as the highest value in their model. And they hadn't necessarily anticipated that, but it wasn't necessarily surprising either. So they reached out to me and my counterpart at Hampton Roads PDC and said, you know, this is coming up on this map. We'd love to fund something, but we're not sure what. Can you talk to the localities? Can you see what might be an opportunity? Sure thing. Will do. So we reached out to locality staff, and it became apparent that everybody acknowledged that what the model was showing was likely accurate, that there was a significant ecological resources that existed in this watershed. But that if we were going to really talk about how to move forward and how to conserve these, we also had to kind of bring in an aspect of economic development and see how we could support both of those goals. We went back to the Coastal Zone Program and they said, that sounds wonderful. This funding actually comes from NOAA, which the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is housed in the Department of Commerce. They said, we'd love to fund things that look at the ecology, natural resources, but then link them up to business development. They do things on working waterfronts, oyster restoration, ecotourism. So onward we went. Whoops. I'll get the hang of it by the end of it, everyone. Okay. So I'll go into a little bit more depth on each year over the next few slides, but it has been a process. So the first year, the bulk of the money actually went to data gathering. The next year, there was an economic study. Then the next year, we started kind of concerted outreach to try to get ideas about what might be policy or program ideas that might work towards those 2 goals. We evolved over year 4 into additional outreach, and now we are in year 5. Okay. In the meantime, at Plan RVA, we've set up some web pages on the Plan RVA website that introduce the general public to the watershed. We have done an ecotourism infrastructure inventory. That's largely just GIS data, but there's a public-facing side of it that's a series of story maps. And right now we're doing analysis to identify gaps and opportunities where we might be able to fill in gaps in access to waterways or other infrastructure elements that might be able to support the ecotourism industry. Oh, goodness. Okay, year one. The bulk of the money in year one went to state resource agencies to do field work. So remember that model I mentioned earlier that showed ecological significance? Well, most of the data for this region was actually about to be so old it would not be allowed to be considered. And that was a shame. So we didn't want that to happen, and we wanted to then answer the question, well, let's make sure that the ecological significance still exists and we can prove it in some data. So DCR Natural Heritage got some funding, DEQ, and who was then Game and Inland Fisheries, but is now Wildlife Resources, all got some funding. Not everything that was produced is publicly available because some of it does focus on threatened or endangered species. But this report is online. I could email it to you. It's on our website. So we can do a few citations from it. There were occurrences of specific species or natural communities found in the watershed. 5 sites in just the watershed were identified as having outstanding ecological significance. That means they're in the top 20% of all sites found across the state, which is pretty significant. And then I liked that quote at the bottom, that ecologists and botanists conducting fieldwork noted that the tidal freshwater wetland communities were among the highest quality in Virginia's tidal rivers. So that was very fruitful work. Indeed, there is ecological significance in the lower Chickahominy watershed. Whoop. Okay, next year, there was an economic study. The questions that we attempted to answer through that process were, do conserved lands have a negative impact on the locality bottom line because they're not developed as, say, a commercial or industrial site? And could they, in a more natural or conserved state, have any support for the economy, the regional economy? We worked with the Center for Regional Analysis at George Mason University, as well as a small private firm, Urban Analytics, Inc., to do analysis. They looked at the 2017 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, the CAFR report, for each of the localities in the watershed. So for New Kent County, for every dollar spent to provide public services to lands with conservation easements, they determined that $1.21, so more, were brought in revenue through taxes. So the more revenue comes in than money spent on services. They also found that indeed there are both direct and indirect jobs. Direct jobs exist because of the conserved land. They're directly linked to it. Indirect might exist, might not, but are absolutely supported by the existence of conserved lands. If that makes sense. And indeed, associated with those jobs, there are wages, there are salaries and benefits that do flow into the 3-county area. And then we actually had a little pot of money left over from one of the grants recently, and we asked George Mason folks to do a value chain analysis related to ecotourism industries. So they looked at traveler accommodations, amusement and recreation industries, tour operators, sightseeing, transportation, and tours. And they looked down the chain, so who do they buy from, and up the chain, who do they supply either products or services to? And they said, yes, there's opportunities to create an even bigger bubble around, or ecosystem, shall we say, around the ecotourism industry in the 3-county area. Whoops. Okay, year 3. We started, we wanted to progress in a very deliberate pattern through outreach opportunity, through kind of outreach to thought leaders and the general public. So we started with what we called thought leader interviews, and we worked with the Institute for Engagement Negotiation at UVA. They interviewed county staff, they interviewed tribal leaders, land conservancy, city agency folks, VEMS from an academic side too, looking at the ecology. I know in New Kent County they spoke to, I think, Matt Smolnick and Justin's daughter. This was a few years. This was pre-COVID, a little bit ago actually. And then we also had some focus groups. Those were on natural resources and history. We kind of had to group them, government and business. County staff, archaeologists, land conservancy, state agency staff, National Park Service, all these people attended these, as well as some businesses. Randy Cladwell, from Rockahawk, Lori Irwin, who owns Paddle-On of Williamsburg, they came and joined the focus groups, which was nice. Feedback we got from that process. There were indeed many people cited they believed that there would be opportunities related to ecotourism, and that especially at that time, the new federal recognition of tribes in the area was changing the landscape of how different government entities would interact with them. And we weren't sure where it was going, but we knew that things were changing, so that was something to kind of pay attention to. So, I went into year 4 with an intention to have a workshop just devoted to the local government tribal relationship, because we realized that was a great focus area. That was a kind of a cornerstone of a lot of policy and program ideas could be built or depended in some way on that being a viable relationship, that being a working relationship. Well, we had planned everything for in-person, and then COVID showed up and threw us a curveball. We went virtual. I think it still worked. This is the best. I think we made some good strides. So you can see the bulletized agenda. Basically, we talked about what are federally recognized tribes, and then we went through kind of introductions, because we realized locality staff had questions about exactly how tribes might work. How do they enter? How should a local government interact with a tribe? And the tribes had the exact same things. How do local governments operate? How do we best interact with them? And then we started talking about strategies for collaboration. We hope to continue those conversations moving forward. Then we had a summit to talk about policy and program ideas that might support the dual goal of natural resource conservation and economic development. Whoops. So one of the ideas that came out in almost every single focus group and interview was the idea of just a space where stakeholders or local governments or tribes or some combination of that group could, a space or a forum that they could get together and talk about these ideas. 2 of the localities were in one PDC, 1 locality was in another PDC, so a PDC wasn't a complete solution. None of the state agencies seemed like a great solution either. It was something that we kind of had to build from the bottom up, and that's where we got the idea of the MOU and the Lower Chickahominy Watershed Cooperative. Other ideas that had bubbled up were improving physical recreational infrastructure, and that's everything from spurs or additional trails related to the Capitol Trail, so bike and pedestrian opportunities, to additional water access points, to any other infrastructure that might support those. Sustainable economic development, a lot of talk about ecotourism opportunities, from paddle tours to bike tours, but there was growth opportunity there. River advocacy, education, and marketing. Market what you have. Land conservation certainly came up. Ensuring protection of sites and traditions that are sacred and historic to the tribes. So building in opportunities for education around that, and possible linking that up with ecotourism opportunities. And then ecological restoration and stewardship to keep what makes this area unique intact. So Whoops. Okay. So let's talk about the MOU. There are, I'd say, 3 groups of signatories: the 3 localities in the watershed, the 3 tribes, and that's the Chickahominy tribe, Chickahominy Indian tribe, Eastern Division, and the Pamunkey Indian tribe. And then the 2 PDCs. We obviously stand to serve and support the localities who are members of the PDC. And we also have an identified funding stream for the long foreseeable future that we believe we can tap to help support the collaborative if it continues. But we did recognize that state agencies, the land conservancies, some businesses, some nonprofits, all were interested in somehow supporting this effort. So we created what we called supporting cooperative partners. They are not signatories to the MOU, but they can, on the back page of the MOU, there's this sample supporting cooperative partner statement. They say that they support these agreement statements and that they stand ready to support the signatories to the MOU through actions that they list that would be customized to whatever the organization is. It might be technical assistance, it might be funding, it might just be attendance and education at meetings. It's whatever makes sense. So the statements of agreement in the MOU are that by working together, can the signatories achieve the goals of enhanced natural resource conservation, environment and cultural protection, and economic opportunities. Basically, working together gets us farther than working alone. That the Lower Chickahominy watershed is an area of important natural and cultural resources. That the signatories agree to support conservation and protection priorities and build on community engagement ideas and concepts that have already been identified. The local government and planning district commission signatories will seek to build equitable relationships with the tribes, and that we can work together to leverage funding from various sources. On that statement, this question has come up when I've previously spoken about this. There is no requirement for funding when you sign the MOU. This just says that we might work together to seek a grant application. But there's no requirement for funding when you sign, when the county might sign.
Excuse me, I have a question.
What?
I have a question.
Okay.
Okay. So you got all my attention at number 5. So so we're going to work together to leverage funding. Who would the funding come to or through?
I think it depends on the situation.
Okay, so can we use an example? So here in beautiful New Kent County, surrounded by water, and we have limited access to canoe or kayak launching sites. If we wanted to engage in a project such as that, would this qualify under advocacy, education, and tourism? Oh yeah, to work together to secure funding.
Yes. Yes. I think so. It depends on how.
And what's your name again?
You may want to partner there. So part of the reason we wanted the supporting cooperative partners is because you get state agencies to sign on, and for instance, James River Association might be interested in signing. They have in the past worked with localities to help identify sites and channeled various funding streams.
So if it was funding, would it come by way of Plain RVA?
It could.
Okay.
And Ms. Page, one example of a potential project that I immediately thought about as we were working through this process is the state owns a large tract of land that has waterfront access on the river. We call it the Crawford Forest site. But that presents a lot of potential and a potential project for this group to work on as well.
Yes. Okay. That's a good example.
Well, there's also that land that's part of the Ware Creek Wildlife Management Area that's in Barramsville that the state owns now. And that, looking at their map, is almost the entire piece of that is shown as outstanding in the sense of ecological value. So. And there's very limited access through to that area for the York River. So.
Right. So, very good points. Those are the statements of agreement. I can tell you that we intend on creating, there's a steering committee that would be constituted by staff of the localities, the tribes, the PDCs, and that kind of directs things. We are intending on creating 3 work groups so that we can take those other priorities and kind of bucket them, and that's where more of the action moves forward. We already have some identified folks who have volunteered themselves and folks who we would like to, they're not voluntold, but strongly encouraged to join. So we can start, we hope to have first work group meetings by the end of October, early November, and start rolling forward. And then the intention is that probably once every year or once every year and a half, 18 months, we would have some sort of a large gathering where we could talk about the work of the work groups. The steering committee could gather, but it could also be kind of big tent. You all would be more than welcome to join us, that kind of thing. So, and I think that is all I have. My next slide is just thank you and my my contact information if I can get there. Oh,
So,
okay, it's on there. I swear.
yeah, I see. So reading through this MOU, you've got like 12% of the land, the project is covered in water and 60% in
Right.
trees. I mean, I don't see anywhere where they're putting any type of restrictions. Trees are natural resources. Anywhere in there is putting any like restrictions on what can be done on the
That
project.
has not been, so the focus of this question has come up a few times.
I would think so.
No new question. The focus has really been on identifying where can we put the most effort to try to find opportunities that would support natural resource conservation, economic development, and that has resoundingly been ecotourism. Because you can't have ecotourism if you don't have the trees or the water. It has never been.
But you're saying that your trees have to stay there? I mean, you're saying.
No.
Okay.
Okay. The intention has never been to restrict activities that landowners could do on their own
Okay.
land or create. I will also say, if you, this is I should say this may be a selling point. The MOU. If at any point you have concerns about where the collaborative we're going, you simply state that you simply submit that you want to exit the MOU. There's a 30-day thing, and you're gone.
I mean, I didn't see anything.
There's nothing. You
What I
just
read
say,
through,
no, thank you.
when I read through it, I didn't see anything like that. But I just wanted to make sure that that's not what the focus groups were going to start focusing on.
And I will say that was loud and clear from the get-go. Before this ever started, this is not about restricting landowners. This is not about additional regulations. This is about finding opportunities.
So have you talked to James City?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I've already presented to them. I know, right?
Well, I think that if I may,
Yeah, Ms. Lockwood.
I think that would be a concern for, just about everybody on this board that, when you start talking about protection and all that stuff, that you don't end up restricting, a farmer's use of his land because it's along or falls in this watershed area, or in Mr. Evelyn's case, the ability to harvest trees, which is his crop.
Yes.
And, farmer's a farmer. So, I would just caution that moving forward, these things start off with great intentions of, how beautiful we can keep Charles City, New Kent, and James City, that it doesn't morph into something more restrictive. So that to me would be, really important, that going forward that this doesn't turn into something more than it's stated today, because as it's stated today, it sounds great. Okay. So I think that, I would just caution that, it doesn't morph into something more restrictive on the land use along the watershed.
Okay. No, thank you for that feedback.
And you did say
That would be great.
Okay. I'll give you his card.
But I think he needs to turn his phone off now. All right.
Anybody else have anything for Sarah?
All right.
Well, thank you.
It's back up. Thank you. Should I? Okay.
All right. Next item is review of the new pre-treatment ordinance. Mr. Dame, I see Chris here.
Yeah.
Bringing in big boys. How you doing, Chris?
Doing well. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you.
I'll take that for what it was meant to be.
That's how we took it.
Big guns.
Good to see you guys. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I believe everybody knows Chris except Mr. Lockwood, but Chris has been intimately involved in the Parham project, Parham plant since I've been here with the county. He was the head of the project manager on the design of the upgrade of the plant back in 2009-10. So he knows this pretty well. And we also consulted with him in preparing this pre-treatment ordinance. So that's why we're here today. Let me get to my notes on it. This is basically for industrial standards for the county. We don't have any right now. We kind of follow the state standards, but we have been getting increasingly, as the county's grown, increasingly requests and hearing for more industrial dischargers. And just so you know, anybody who wants to discharge 25,000 gallons a day, even if it's domestic waste, qualifies in as industrial discharger. So there are some, that's according to the state. And this ordinance would also allow us to dictate what they can actually discharge above and beyond what the state code allows them, because every treatment plant's a little bit different. And we want to make sure that we don't harm our plant in any way, shape, or form. We have received some requests. I don't know if I can tell you about Negroni, that we talked with them. They had real concerns about the fact we didn't have an ordinance, and that if something came up that we would restrict them. We had to do a lot of talking to assure them that that was not the case, because I'd seen their numbers and I didn't feel it would affect the county, and Chris had reviewed them also. But we do have the biodiesel company down there at Parham that's interested in becoming, but they do have some issues. And we've had other requests that we've had to flat out, Rodney and I have talked about several, that we've had to flat out tell them no, because we had concerns, but we had no standards. We want to protect the county, but we also want to protect the plant, because one of the good things with the plant, we sell a lot of reclaimed water, and that anything that comes into the plant can affect that. We make money on that every year. Also, nutrient credits. We've received over $500,000 in nutrient credits over the years. I don't want to affect that either, because those are known incomes. An industrial user could come in here and then shut down in a few years, but I can still get those nutrient credits because they're built out through the year 20s into the almost 2030. So as long as they're there, we're going to keep getting money. And the other issue is if we bring a big industrial user in and we don't keep control of it, we could violate our permit, and that's fines, and that's other problems. And then the worst part is they could make us do upgrades to the plant, which I don't want to do. I'm proposing that we put this on the November board packet for public hearing. I thought it was too quick to put it in front of you today and then put it in October. In case you all had any questions on it. But essentially, that's where we're at with this.
Any questions for Mr. Dame?
What kind of industries would this restrict coming to New Kent? If we're looking at specific items that are going to be restricted in quantities, what kind of industries would we be looking at saying kind of a no to in this sense?
Well, based on the study that Arcadis had done, the big thing right now is TKN, zinc, and copper. We couldn't take anything that discharges that. We're at our permit and then what's in our natural groundwater has issues with that. And what we were getting in right now as far as TKN, that's essentially ammonia.
Right.
The rest areas really hit us hard with that. Yeah, it's urine. And they have almost no water in their flushing facility, so it's almost pure urine coming through. So that they're really high. I was surprised when we saw that. That's where we get a lot of our TKNs, and until we can build up more flow, those TKNs, it's concentrated. The solution to pollution is dilution. So if we get more flow, that we could change that over time. But as we are today, we couldn't allow anybody coming in that's going to dump a bunch more TKN on us.
And Larry, let me know if I'm not correct, but we wouldn't be saying no to the business. They would just have to do some additional treatment before it comes to our system. So we're not turning away businesses, but there would be some additional processes involved.
Absolutely.
So they would essentially be pre-treating before they discharge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And this is done all throughout the industry. I mean, most big cities have pre-treatment ordinances. They bring in industrial users, and they have to pre-treat before they dump it into the system. Okay. Tell me if I'm lying, Chris.
No, that's Rodney has the exact point. It's not limiting in the effect that if it doesn't meet the pre-treatment limits that the study found, it's just they have to treat down to that level prior to discharging, which would then be their responsibility and their cost to ensure that when it's entered into the sewer system, it's not going to be interfere with the treatment process at Parham Landing or prohibitive in any way to all the things that Mr. Dave mentioned with the nutrient credits and the reclaimed water and the fines and the process. The permit was new back in 2000 and the limits went down, and they're going to keep going that way. So we have to stay ahead of that and make sure that we're not, harming the system and causing operational and financial challenges to the utility.
Well, it's to protect the county. That ultimately is to protect the county.
Would you also say that we don't see anything on the horizon with the existing business base that we have that would be, adding some restriction to them?
We don't see anything coming in today.
Okay.
What's here today? I mean, as I said, the rest areas are a high user. They would be considered based on their flow alone. Could be considered an industrial user. But, all this is factor in what's coming in today.
Okay.
They analyzed everything coming in today. We did a lot of testing, a lot of studying, and that's where we came up with this.
Thank you.
Got some, Mr. Tiller?
Yeah. So if an industry came in and they had to pre-treat, is there a residual or a byproduct that they would have to deal with after and then what would they be able to, would that still be able to come into the system, or would they have to haul it? Or
that's what Virginia Biodiesel does right now. They do haul away some of their excess waste, and but he feels that he can do some pre-treatment, and rather than haul, he'll still have to haul some away, but he won't be able to haul as much away. At least that's Brian. When I've talked to Ryan about it, that's what he's told me.
so, I don't know how to say. I don't even know how to ask this question. I guess that would be something that would go through your department before it was approved, and they would know in advance that they may have to still haul.
Yes.
Okay.
There's actually they have to apply for a permit through the county, through the utilities department. It's in the code here. They have to apply for a permit meeting the local limit standards, which we've set. It's not in here per se, because those change over time, and we will constantly be reevaluating what those local limits are. And if rather than put it in the code where you have to amend the code every time you want to change the local limits to, such as if TKN numbers decrease that we're coming in and we could allow more, then we'd have to have a public hearing to decrease it. Where is if the local limits are established by the utilities department, we would obviously consult with you all. We would be able to keep that on our website and let them know what they can get.
All right, so this is going to be on the agenda in November.
That's what my proposal is, yes.
Yep, that sounds good. All right, next item.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Uh,
I'm gonna step aside. Larry is taking up a lot more of your time. See y'all soon.
Thanks, Chris. Have a good day. Item 3, change section 38.15, county code, delinquent utility bills.
Yes, we began this back in 2019. Brendan brought this before you, and we were talking about doing this. We actually put together the same code. Nothing's changed other than who the board members are, because Mr. Lockwood's now on here. But this is just to mirror what the state code requires us to do on disconnections. Found out that the state code, I think, changed in 2016, and we were not in compliance with that. So this is merely just meeting what the state code gives, the authority the state code gives us to do disconnections. It's a little bit longer than I like, but we got to follow the state code. I think most of you remember my concerns about it, but we have to mirror the state code. The reason we're bringing it to you now is COVID hit, and the state wouldn't allow us to do any disconnections. So we've been, we haven't done disconnections since 2019. And now the state has allowed us to do this again. I felt we needed to get the code up to speed. You have anything to add, Brendan?
I agree with everything Mr. Dane said.
All right, so this is just kind of, so this is going to be on in November as well.
Right. It's just basically a housekeeping thing that we need to do. We were already planning it. We've already adjusted our billing cycles. We've already set up our own internal ways to handle this, so we'll meet the state code. We were all prepared for it when COVID hit, so we're there.
All right, we'll see you in November.
Okay.
Next item. Mr. Dame again.
Yes. Resumption of discussion of water and sewer disconnects. As I stated, the state moratorium ended August 30th, 2021. We can now officially start disconnect for non-payment, but this has had an impact on our citizens and customers. So I didn't want to just go out there and do it without giving you all, let you know what our view is, and if you wanted to change it, we can do anything we'd like. But essentially, we have right now 185 customers that could be disconnected today, according to this. $132,000 are outstanding water and sewer bills out there, and that's a lot of money. And I understand that there are some customers, and we sent out a letter. Rodney and I reviewed it, and we sent it out in August, basically telling them that this was coming, or September. This was coming, and that if they wanted now to head this off, we could set up payment arrangements with people, even more forgiving, in the sense that we used to only go for maybe 3 to 6 months at the most. We're up to a year now. If they can set up payment arrangements, and we've gotten 20 customers who've come in for that. We also had some more of our COVID money come in, and we've pretty much exhausted that. I think we're about $100. I don't know if Rebecca knows that exact amount we got in there. So we've exhausted all of that money. But I would like to start doing actual disconnects in second week in November. The reason being is I'd like to send out another letter telling them the board now understands, and we will be starting this in November, to these customers who are behind. Also give them the opportunity to do payment arrangements with the county. Encourage them to call us. We work with anybody who will talk to us and is reasonable. We work with them any way we can. We've done this, which most of you all don't know about. I still remember a gentleman who set it up. He was coming in every 2 weeks like clockwork. He was in our office dropping off his money, and he'd thank us every time for working with him on it. He had gone through a divorce, and he was behind, and we didn't cut him off, but he was very grateful. So this works. If you talk to us, we can figure out a way to make it work. The problem is a lot of people don't talk to us. They literally will not say anything until we turn them off. So I want to send out another letter, let them know that now that we're going to be cutting off this time, let the board, so the board's aware of it. Give alternative payment arrangements. One of the things that just happened is after I'd already submitted this, I got and Rebecca got it too, the state has now authorized, the SEC has authorized more funds for COVID relief. The application's due the 22nd of this month. There's not a lot of guidance with it. They say the guidance will come out after the money, you have to submit your application. So I'm not sure how it's all going to work, but this will also give us some time to see if there's going to be COVID money ready, because we have some more COVID applications in our office. And so this will allow us more time in November to at least assess if certain people will qualify for it. Because right now, the only thing I could read on there is 60 days in arrearages, and most of these customers are 60 days or more in arrearages. But and the payment arrangements, I do want to tell you, one of the things that we do ask you to do on that is you keep your current bill current while you're making the arrangements. If you fall behind on your current bill, then all bets are off. And the reason for that is that they just keep getting further behind. And then it's just an impossible situation. So.
Anybody?
Mr. Chairman? Just a quick question, Larry. I understand you guys are sending out letters, getting ready to send out another one. Are y'all able to call these people on the phone or some other means of communication other than a letter? Because if you're already getting the late fee billing and all that other stuff in the mail, one more thing from New Kent probably just ending up in the trash. Is there a way to, another means of communication with these folks?
We don't have all the information like that. The only thing that's required from them that they have to give us when they sign up is their mailing address. We do have some phone numbers, and those customers that reach out to us, you want us to call you back, we got a number for you. But we'll reach out any way we can to the people if we have the actual abilities to. But some people just give us. We have emails. We'll send the emails if we can.
Okay.
Any way we can get a hold of them, we will. But also the other thing, the state moratorium on disconnects also wouldn't allow us to apply any late fees. So we haven't applied late fees since 2019 either. I'm proposing also that not to begin applying them again until 2022. January 1, after that time, any bills that come out after that start applying the late fees again to give the customers a chance to pay. And if you work in a payment arrangement with us, we won't apply late fees even into 2022. That's another incentive to help them to pay. So we're not just hitting them over the head harder. But we will reach out to them any way we can.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Sounds reasonable to me.
Is that okay? Then that's what we'll go ahead and move forward with that, and I'll keep Mr. Hathaway totally informed of what's going on all the way through this process.
What?
No motion.
We don't need a
needed.
motion for that.
Just consensus to proceed with collections in November.
Yeah. All right.
And Mr. Chairman, may I add that, Mr. Dame, I appreciate the way your attitude towards this. I've worked with you with several of our other customers and stuff, and it's great that you're willing to work with them, and I've seen you in action, so we appreciate it.
Well, like I said, we don't want to hurt anybody, but when 95% of your customers are paying their bills on time, you really need to ask the others to step up and do their job, because again, this is it affects the other people if there's not. So
Looks like it's averaging about a little over $700.
excuse me.
The bill's probably averaging late fees about $700. If you got 185,000,
185 customers over 132,000. But
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, there's people who haven't paid since January of 2020.
Wow.
I understand that, and we have talked to some of them, and they've had COVID problems. They lost their jobs and whatnot. But to be frank, there's been some of them who have called us and actually have set up payment arrangements before the first letter went out because they knew they had trouble. And they kept asking us, when is this going to start up again? I haven't said anything simply because I wanted to let you ladies and gentlemen know first. so that if you got a call, you knew what was going on.
And the COVID money that you received, how was that applied? I mean, it's not applied to their bills, right?
Yeah,
It is.
literally pays off their
Okay.
bills. We have paid over $10,000 in outstanding bills.
Okay.
With the COVID money, and it's simply they have to come in and attest. There's a form that the state provided us. They have to attest that it was a COVID-related incident, and they have to fill out a W-9 form. So, that was a question that I've never gotten an answer from. The state says, well, we're not sure if it's covered under that. So the county, in an abundance of caution, we make them fill out a W-9 form so that, there's no issues with the county on this.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 5, contract for employee compensation and classification study. Mr. Hathaway?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Before you, you have a proposed contract with McGrath Human Resources Group to conduct an employee compensation and classification study, otherwise called a salary study, which we had discussed in great detail during our budgeting process, and we actually budgeted $100,000 for this current budget to fund this study. We advertised requests for proposals in June of this year, actually June 14th. The due date was July 15th, and we had a great response, better than I had anticipated, by receiving 10 proposals. And for something like this, I was hoping for 5. So we're pleased with the response. I did put together a panel to review the proposals and to narrow the proposals down to about 4 or 5 firms that we would meet with, and we did conduct those meetings. On my panel was our Assistant County Administrator, our Human Resources Director, our Payroll Specialist, and our Deputy Fire Chief, who also serves in a human resource role for the fire department. After conducting the interviews, we unanimously selected McGrath Human Resources Group to work with and do work in New Kent. Their proposal was the most comprehensive. They have done work in Virginia. They're currently working with, it just escaped me. It's right outside of Blacksburg. I'm sorry, the county. No. Montgomery? Yes, Montgomery County. They're currently working with Montgomery County, and they've worked with various other Virginia counties as well. We really like them also is because that their experience, they've done plans just for public safety officials, fire and rescue and sheriff, and they've done it for counties as a whole. They've done schools and other public organizations too, jails. Again, we believe that they put together the most comprehensive proposal. $69,750 was their proposed price. As I mentioned, we budgeted $100,000 for this study, so we are under that, and we're pleased with that. Be happy to answer any questions. You do have the draft contract before you.
Any questions?
Just one. How long did they anticipate the study?
7 months. Yeah. 7 months.
So, Mr. Hathaway, we'll get their figures before we set the budget next year.
Well, we hope, but if we don't, our plan for the budget going into that is to set aside a reserve amount to address the results of the study. So we might not have the results when the budget is adopted, but we will. Our plan is to have a reserve set aside so the board can come back and then they'll have funding, dedicated funding, to address the results of the study.
So we should set aside the $30,000 we saved.
I think you might need a little more than that.
I think so.
All right, if there's no other discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lockwood?
I move that to authorize the county administrator to execute the proposed with McGrath Human Resources Group for an employee compensation and classification study.
I apologize. Should have been proposed contract.
Proposed contract with McGrath Human Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Lockwood. Any discussion? Stanger, poll the members, please.
Ms. Page?
Aye.
Mr. Steers?
Aye.
Mr. Lockwood?
Aye.
Mr. Tiller?
Aye.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye. Our last item today is request to solicit proposals for an internet service provider. Mr. Hathaway again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Just wanted to give you an update of where we are with our broadband effort and for the public as well. I know it's been some time since River Street last came to us and made their presentation. I have placed at your seats the final plan provided by River Street Networks, and that information is online as well for the general public. You got it? Okay. Also want to talk about our process because it's a little normal than I think the way we would normally. It's a little different from the way that I think we would normally proceed with entering into an agreement with a broadband firm, but we've had some time constraints due to the VATI grant and the amount of funding that's been made available during this process. We have submitted a joint application to the Department of Housing and Community Development for a VATI grant, Virginia Telecommunication Initiatives grant, for a project totaling $9,768,000. Of that amount, the county's match would be $2,443,826. River Street is providing a match of $3,548,870. Most of that coming from the federal RDOF grant that they have successfully received. And we're requesting from the state $3,775,304. This project will provide access to 1,272 homes and businesses. So far different from the original plan that was presented to you by River Street months ago, and I've been working closely with them. You may recall the original plan was in the first 3 years they would bring on about 270 homes. And I gauged from the board that was not acceptable, and we've been working to condense that schedule. And I do think we have a good plan going forward. Now, this 1,272 homes also is not just concentrated in one part of the county. Actually, it's our goal to reach as many people as we can during this first goal. So a good portion of Burnsville is incorporated in this first phase. Also Talliesville Road, Old Church, that northwest corner of the county as well, and some of Lenexa as well. We tried to be as comprehensive as we could. We did not touch Bottoms Bridge during this first phase, and that was intentional because a good portion of that area is already served by Cox, and our priority, our main goal is to reach the unserved and underserved areas of the county. We will get to Bottoms Bridge at some point, but we really wanted to focus on those unserved areas. Now that we've submitted, and I started by saying this is not our normal process because we've actually moved forward with the grant before we have an agreement in process, which is not the normal way to do things. But there was a deadline for the VATI grant process, and during this cycle, the governor has put $700 million into the VATI grant program, which is unheard of, and we'll probably never see this opportunity again. That money comes from unspent CARES Act funding and ARPA money, so it's federal money going into this program, and it is one-time money. So I felt it was important to get our name in the hat. Now we need to work on our contract and agreement to procure this service. I do have an RFP, a draft RFP that I will pass out. I won't go over it, but in your time, I'd ask that you review it and give me any comments you may have. And again, this is draft form. Once we put out the RFP, I'd like to put that out for a month to receive proposals. We'll go through the proposals and present a recommendation for you to select a firm to work with, which means if it's a firm that's not River Street, it may disqualify us from VATI, but that's not a showstopper for us. Because even without the VATI grant funds, we still have funding available and enough funding to move forward with the broadband project. But definitely it helps getting the state money. And once we receive proposals too and select a firm to work with, then definitely Brendan and I will work very closely with the selected firm to develop a contract to bring before you. Our goal is to do all of this prior to December, which we believe will be when the VATI grants are announced, and prior to the board is in a position to having to make a decision to accept the grant. We want to have that contractual agreement in place before we accept the state money. So that's where we are. I am very optimistic given the amount of money available in the VATI funds this year that we will receive an award. I tell you, working with River Street thus far has been good. I believe we have a much more thorough grant application than we've submitted in years past. And again, at the end of the day, if we are not successful in the VATI grant opportunity, we still have the funding set aside to move forward with this plan of serving 1,272 homes in our first phase. I'd be happy to answer any questions. No action is needed at this point. I just wanted to provide you and the public an update of where we are with our broadband initiative.
Ms. Lockley?
Sure. Rodney, obviously you've got the draft of
Yes.
I would like to just ask a few questions kind of prior to that. One of my concerns was the timeline, and that appears to have been addressed. I'm concerned about them just offering a timeline that appeases our concern as opposed to the ability to fulfill that timeline. And that needs to be in the RFP, that there are penalties when you don't hit the mark, because the incentive needs to be there to get this thing done in a manner that others have said could be done, where River Street has almost doubled that timeline in their original proposal. I see that they've condensed that down to about 17 or 18 months, where it was 3 years. And when I asked them specifically if putting more funding towards that would make it happen quicker, they said no. And, now we're saying if we put more money towards that, we can achieve the timeline. And there's a little bit of double speak there that concerns me. I think the VATI grant is great. I do kind of agree that, applying for a grant before we have an agreement really kind of reduces our ability to negotiate that contract if they're dangling a couple $1 million in front of us before we start. So some of the things that I think we really need to be prepared to address in the RFP are, the type of revenue sharing that's going to be there, because we are making a huge investment. We are giving them a ton of money, and there should be some return on that investment for the county. And what they offered previously from River Street doesn't even come close. It's not a drop in the bucket. So in addition to some return on investment, I would like to hear a discussion about some percentage of ownership that we retain for putting up all of this money. I can't imagine, I can't identify a single project where we would put up $25 million, and at the end of the day, yes, the residents of the county, the businesses in the county would have internet service, but we would have nothing tangible to show for that. When we build a school, we have a building. When we put in a road, we have a road. I just can't imagine us giving a company $25 million and not having some residual ownership in that project. And, you know, that's just me. I'm hoping that some of these respondents to the RFP come back and show us something better, because, you know, I think River Street's got a sweet deal right now, the way it's written. And like I said, you know, I really would like to see a clear definition of timeline and penalties if it's not held. So that's kind of my 2 cents on where we stand right now.
Thank you. No, those are very good points, some of which I have discussed with River Street. They're definitely open and fine with the revenue sharing agreement. We'll need to talk about what that share is. I've also approached them, and they seemed open to it as well, as the county having a right of first refusal in case they ever went under or wanted to sell the system. And not only just the right of first refusal, but the investment that we've made would be counted towards the purchase price of the system as a whole, if the event ever occurred that the county was considering to take ownership of the system. They seem pretty open, and definitely we'll need to have those conversations.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's, you know, there's a lot of consolidation going on in these. There's a lot of guys out there, you know, shooting from the hip and building these projects. When they get to the point where they've got a significant portion of Virginia or a region covered, then that's when the big guys come in and say, hey, we'd like to buy you now. So I think, you know, that's something for Brendan to be taking a look at, that it's included in our contract with whoever we do business with, that, you know, not just a right of refusal, but, you know, a vested interest in what that return would be in the event of a sale. And I'd also like to just say that the revenue sharing, I think so far from what I've seen, should not be something carried by the customer, that we are actually going to be sharing in River Street's revenue, their profit side. It should not be at the expense of the customer, you know, raising rates to cover our share. So, thank you.
He said everything I told him.
Did I get it right?
Ms. Steers?
And also, Rodney, in the meetings I had with Lon Welchel when we were discussing this, was he told me that they would be willing to put antennas on some towers throughout the county just for some of these customers to have temporary service, you know, not the buried cable to the house. But I don't see anything in this plan about that.
Well, that was a finding in the study that you have before you. They felt that it wasn't feasible to look at a wireless option, and they're recommending a fiber optic to the home to the business option throughout the entire county instead of a wireless option. They said cost-wise and time-wise, you really didn't have a savings by doing the wireless, which is less. It's not as reliable as fiber to the home. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, some service is better than no service, you know.
And I think by them agreeing to expedite their schedule, it's their intention to get service to homes a lot quicker than the original proposal of 3 years and only having 200 and some homes connected. So.
Okay. Thanks.
Anybody else? Anybody have any other business? just real quick, I know on your weekly update,
Yes.
the census is a big thing. Where do you think we're going to be at with that? I mean, they want us by the end of the year to I mean, I've gone through this process twice, and I mean, that's kind of unrealistic.
It is a very unrealistic goal that the state is currently mandating right now, that the census be done by the end of the year, especially when we've gotten the information so late and the state representative districts aren't even drawn yet, which means if we were to do redistricting right now and the state does something different, we could be in the position where we would have to come back and change our plans. So I know VML, I know VACO is really pushing to get that deadline extended. But where we are as a county, we received the data about 2 weeks ago. We will be presenting at the October work session, a summary of the census data. There is a resolution that would need to be adopted, establishing goals for our local redistricting process. And then our plan is to come back to you at the November work session. At the October regular meeting, we will be presenting information on the census data. At the October work session, we will be presenting several options and plans for you to consider for redistricting. It will also be our recommendation that those options and plans, we not select one plan at that October work session, but we take those options and plans out to the public for public comment, basically during the month of November. And I will be reaching out to various different groups, the Republican parties, definitely the school board, the Clergy Association, NAACP, any group that want to meet to discuss redistricting. I'm willing to meet with them. And we should also have some advertised community meetings as well. It's my hope to get as much community input as possible, so that when you come back in December, we can review the public comments that we've received and select a plan to take to public hearing on.
You still have to get in within 1%, right? Of every district has to be within.
Actually, the state mandate the state regulation is to be within 5%.
5%.
Our goal, though, has always been, and we've been pretty good historically from what I can tell, we've been within 2%. Mm-hmm. So, and we're going to try to stick to that 2%.
3, don't you?
No, ma'am. We will.
The board. You'll have to submit a plan to the Attorney General. I always want to call him the Commonwealth Attorney. You'll have to submit a plan to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General will have to approve that plan.
So, it's a fun process. You haven't done that before.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm just curious if we could, on other business, get an update on where we stand with the road viewers and moving forward with that committee to get some stuff going. I've got projects I want to get done, and obviously we want to run it through committee and all that, but I'd like to just get an update on where we stand with that.
Sure. First, with the Board of Road Viewers, we're still waiting on some appointments, but we'll send out information to you all of what vacancies there are and from what districts we need appointments, so that we can make those appointments as soon as possible so that group can start meeting. But also, we have advertised a transportation planner position. I believe we have about 3 applications in so far. We're still looking for that position. It's important to me that we get the right person in that, but we do still have some appointments that need to be made to the Board of Road Viewers.
Did you want to call anybody out?
No.
I'm one.
I'm looking for the right person.
All right.
All right. Anything else? If not, the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Supervisors will be held at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, October 12th, 2021, and the next work session at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, October 27th, both in the boardroom of the New Kent County Administration Building. The board will also meet for a budget retreat on October 29th, 2021, from 9 to noon. Is that going to be at the Forestry Center, or are we still determined?
October 29th.
I think it's going to be at the Forestry Center, but we'll say to be determined just in case
Okay.
that doesn't work out. But I believe it's our goal that it is at the Forestry Center.
Okay. All right. Motion for adjournment. Ms. Tiller. Stanger, poll the members, please.
Mr. Steers?
Aye.
Mr. Lockwood?
Aye.
Mr. Tiller?
Aye.
Ms. Page?
Aye.
Mr. Ellis?
Aye.
What time? That's
Thank you. Adjourn. Yeah, I know.